So last week we heard a bit about what meditation really is. And one of the things he said about what meditation really is that it's really about going and trying to access some other ways of thinking, other ways of different sorts of consciousness, even other realms, and then bringing the influence of those other things that we access in meditation and letting that affect and perfume the rest of our lives. So this week we're going to hear from 3 different people about just that, about how their meditation practice perfumes and influences the rest of their life and the rest of their practice. So we're going to first of all hear from Maitrivasin. He's going to tell us about his practice of the mindfulness of breathing and how that's influenced his life. And then Helen's going to talk about the Maitrivasin and how that's influenced her life. And then finally, I'm going to talk a bit about the visualization practice that I do most days. It's something a bit different. And before we do that, I just want to say that I don't know if you've ever tried to talk about your meditation practice to another person. It's actually not very easy. So I feel really, really grateful to Maitrivasin and Helen that they agreed to do this when we asked them without too much coaxing. So, so without further ado, I'd like to invite Maitrivasin to the stage.
Hello, hello. Is that coming through? Thank you. Hey, hello. Well, in a way, it's lovely to be here, and in a way, it's quite a big challenge for me, actually. So I'm glad I was asked so I can practice working with a virgin, which actually is why I do a lot of the mindfulness of breathing. It's just getting the gap, basically. So, 15 minutes isn't really enough to say a lot about my experience and my practice of mindfulness. So I'll just say a few things, and hopefully there's something in there that will inspire you or you'll find helpful. And I think my first memory of actually doing the mindfulness of breathing was a sense of what I used to call my mind is actually not really my mind. You know, I had some kind of control over it, but it wasn't mine in the sense that I could make it do what I wanted it to do, and just realised it kept going off and doing its own thing. And it's just like, hold on a second, I've lived 30 odd years thinking I had a mind, or it's my mind, but it wasn't really. There was something new. So when the metaphor of the horse and rider sort of appeared, it was like, oh yeah, I can see it. You know, I've got there's me. I think I'm going there, and a lot of the time something else is happening. You know, something else is making decisions, and different things are happening. So yeah, that's quite a revelation really to see into myself, into my mind not really being tamed really in that sense. So I think a lot of the mistakes I made early on with meditation were things like giving myself a hard time. So every time I found myself distracted, I'd give myself a hard time and talk to myself quite sort of abruptly and stuff. And I've tried being very rigid, so I found myself sort of doing mindfulness of counting or sort of breathing to the count itself, just really shifting focus of the meditation. And also just not really sitting very comfortably and just paying, I suppose, more attention to how it might appear or how I thought I was doing it rather than how my body was sort of comfortable and reacting to it. And having done and helped a lot of introductory courses, I've realised that where I really went wrong is that I wasn't very receptive to the instructions given. So a lot of the things that all these mistakes that I was making really, that made it difficult or challenging for me. Actually, more and more I did the introductory courses and I supported it. I realised, oh yeah, that's mentioned. I don't remember listening to that one. I don't remember listening to that one. And it was, oh well. So it taught me something about my receptivity really, and I was thinking about this. I got this image of how I would go about doing a flat pack. I think I'd pick up the instructions, I'll look at it, put it aside, and put it all together, and realise something's not quite right, and eventually go back to the instructions. And it's not really the most effective way. Well, that's the conclusion I've come to. So thankfully, I've done many introductory courses, supported them, and I've eventually heard many other points that were made on the first one. I'd like to say a bit about, I suppose, what I found the most helpful that improved my mindfulness of breathing, and that was bringing metta into it. So I found that just bringing metta into my responses to myself especially was the most beneficial thing I did. And that's kind of when every time I found myself distracted, I just surrounded it with metta. And I've got Savannah to thank for that really, because he brought that to my awareness and just said, just whatever's arising, bring metta to it. And it was about, like, it makes me frustrated. Bring metta to it, surrounded in metta, and whatever was coming up, just surrounded in metta. So I found that the most useful thing that's improved my mindfulness of breathing. And I could say, like, so I've got a story about not being a good meditator. So I'm not a natural meditator. I'm not a good meditator, and I think I justify that or that story about myself because like I get distracted a lot, and I don't get very concentrated. Or these are all like stories I tell myself. But more and more I've realised that actually there's a lot of benefits that have come from my meditation, from doing mindfulness of breathing. And that started to begin a new story arise, and actually this is not true. So I can see that this story I built is based on other things. It's not really a factual thing. And I have benefited a lot actually from mindfulness of breathing. I can see that in a lot of aspects of my life. And there have been a handful of times where I've actually had, I could say maybe a magical experience of meditation, especially on retreats. So I could say sometimes there is something to it, but most of my experience and benefits from mindfulness of breathing is just going at it little by little, and then drop by drop. It's really affected my life a lot. And some of these like around my body, for example, I've got much less back pain and stuff. I realise because my posture's a lot better. I brought a lot more awareness to my body, and in fact, it was a different, maybe related thing someone mentioned today, but quite a lot in the last few years of people have said, "Oh, you seem taller than you used to be." And I'm in my 40s now. I've stopped growing. I'm pretty sure of that. But I do think I'm taller in terms of I stand up straighter. So it's really nice, just bringing awareness to my body and stuff has actually relaxed my body, and it's actually had an effect, a visible effect, observable by other people, and I just feel a lot more comfortable in my body. So there's a verse in the Dharmamayi about taming the mind brings happiness, and I think maybe a lot of people can relate to this actually. There's a stillness that we can bring our minds, and sometimes after the mindfulness of breathing, I open my eyes and everything's much more beautiful. Just bringing a bit more stillness to my mind. I can see that it actually makes me appreciate and see things more beautifully. Colours are more vibrant, shapes are more sort of attractive and beautiful, aesthetically more pleasing. And I can see that actually, if I can live from that stillness more and more, actually most of my day, most of my life would be much more vibrant and beautiful. But yeah, to be honest, it doesn't last very long. It's quickly get into thoughts and distractions again, so the mind just picks up again. But I can see that it's very, very potent practice if I can live out of that, especially. Also, I'd like to say a bit about emotions. So when I first came to the Buddhist Centre, I would have said I had no emotions. I don't do emotions. They don't exist. And now I can see that they're actually I was very alienated basically for what was happening for me. So I wasn't very aware of things. And kind of lived quite, I suppose I was depressed before I came. And I lived quite a dark, grey, dull sort of life. And what mindfulness of breathing and bringing awareness to my experience has done is really turned it into sort of like a more of a rainbow sort of thing. Things of life has got a lot more colourful. And not always happiness and joy, but that's part of it. I suppose that's part of the rainbow in terms of human experience and emotional experiences. But what I'd like to, I suppose, really point out one experience for me from this summer is around somebody that I had very strong feelings for. I'd fallen in love with almost 20 years ago now, and not heard for many years. So it was a very painful experience for me when that didn't work out. And this summer I got back in contact with this person, and we had some communication, and a lot of feelings were arousing, and a lot of feelings came to the surface. And it was quite stark difference for me in a way that although things didn't quite work out in a way, and there was quite a lot of pain and sadness again, my experience of it was very different. So this image that came to me is that when it first happened, it was most like, now it's more like I was watching a washing machine going round from the outside. But when it first happened, and I had no experience of meditation and Dharma, it was like I was in it. So I was going round and round and being, just really getting thrown around, and really had it was the most painful experience of my life. And this summer when this happened again, I had many opportunities to bring awareness to it, bring and get in the gap, and almost that sense of just stepping out of it and just seeing it all happening and experiencing it and feeling it, but actually not get lost in it. And it was a very different experience, still painful and difficult, but a very, very different sense to it. Yeah. So another thing, I mean, you might recognise this level of body, thought, emotions, and others from another teaching, but I'd like to bring others, like becoming more aware of other people. So mindfulness of breathing has really increased my awareness of other people. And a little example I've got of that is like when me and I've all go shopping. So we go shopping every now and then, and we didn't used to do as much, I think, because we've got very different ways of shopping. So I like browsing, I like looking at loads of things, not necessarily buying anything, but just like looking, and he likes to go and get everything on the list, and he knows where it is in the supermarket or wherever, and then get to the till, and I'm still in the first aisle. And then I can see he's frustrated, and I'm sort of a bit frustrated, and it's not quite working out, but we've developed this awareness that we've got different ways of doing, different preferences and different ways of doing this, and now he'll come to me and go, oh, we've got time today, let's do a browsing shopping. Let's do that, let's do it your style. So we go and do that, you know, and then if there's not much time, or if I think one of us is tired or something, I just make sure I don't browse. And I just stick to him closely. So this is just all bringing more awareness to how other people are and what state they're in, what's going on for them, and what works best for everybody. Yeah. So yeah, good. We enjoy shopping these days, and yeah, we just have a laugh about it. So to generalise, I think I'd say what's really developed this ability and what brought these benefits to me is to be able to get in the gap, which is again in the introductory course we talk about it. Just being able to get in the gap and becoming aware of the gap and choosing to do something skillful, something more beneficial, and that's the main practice. And I've come to realise that when I really practice developing that skill, that muscle, if we can call it, is actually in the mindfulness of breathing. Every time I catch myself being distracted and I bring myself back to the breath, I'm getting in the gap, and I'm bringing myself to something skillful, something positive, which is the object of the meditation in the mindfulness of breathing. So every time I do that, I'm developing this ability to get in the gap and change what I'm doing and really create a creative response, do something more positive. And that's one of the greatest things for me in mindfulness of breathing, is developing this skill, this ability to respond in a more positive and creative way. And also, the more I do that, the more I get aware of this, and more the value of this ability it's like makes more sense to actually congratulate myself when I do it and rejoice in it, because we talk about it, and I've been told it many times in the meditations, in the teachings, or congratulate yourself every time you come back, which for years it didn't make any sense, but actually it makes a lot of sense. It is well worth congratulating ourselves when we catch ourselves distracted and we bring ourselves back to the meditation. It's really developing this ability to liberate ourselves from our shackles and our limitations and create something better, more growth. And I've just had a wave, so I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. It was interesting listening to that, just to hear how many things we have in common. I was also interested, Dharmamayi thought that neither of us put up much resistance to giving this talk, because when I was first invited to do this talk, I thought, me? Are you sure? Would you not rather ask somebody that's good at meditation? Because I'm really, it's not really my strong suit. I'm worse than pretty much everybody that ever meditated. Quite unique. And I thought it's probably not true. And if at any point, however many years ago, I'd heard somebody say, well, do you know what? Meditation is quite hard, and sometimes I don't think I'm very good at it. I might have thought that was quite reassuring. So, and I've also come to the conclusion that actually it doesn't matter whether I think I'm any good at it or not, as long as I do it. We've all heard the only bad meditation is the one that you don't do. And I just thought, yeah, But I think it's true. So I first came in contact with the movement about 12, 15 years ago when I was living in London. And I'd struggled with depression for most of my adult life up until that point. And I sort of had the idea that my life would be better if I had more money or a better house or more friends or a better job or a partner, all these things that we all think about. But I also knew that it wouldn't fix it. And I thought that the Dharma probably had the key. So I trotted off to London Buddhist Centre and signed up on one of their 6-week courses, which was just a meditation course at that time. And for the first 3 weeks, we did the mindfulness of breathing, and I thought, well, it's quite nice, it's quite peaceful. I'm only managing to count up to about 2, but I do quite like it, it's okay. And then they introduced the Maitrivasin. Stage 1, we're going to just direct positive energy towards ourselves, at which point I totally floundered. And I remember sitting there in the silence with my eyes shut, and I couldn't think of a single nice thing to say about myself. And that sudden realization made me so miserable. And I don't recall whatever else was said during the rest of that session, because I just sat there trying not to cry because I thought this was just dreadful, and I never went back. But obviously it doesn't end there, because however many years later I'm now giving a talk about the same practice, so, which almost is a testament to its power right there. I decided that I was going to go and have another go, and I came here and discovered I wasn't the only person ever to have struggled with it. I remember when you introduced it for Danya, you made the bold claim that the Maitrivasin would make us better looking. I'm not entirely sure that's 100% truthful, but now I do know what he was getting at. At first I struggled, and I had to come up with sort of mental lists of things that I was good at, even if it was spreadsheets or making cakes or just any particular skill that I had. I'd moved back to Sheffield to take care of my mum when she was still alive, and I thought, well, at least I can give myself some credit for that. I'd joined the intro class with my friend, and I sort of thought, well, when it comes to stage 2, and I think about her, maybe she's thinking about me. What would she say about me? Why? There are people that like me, I think. Why might they like me? And I realised that I'm not entirely without good qualities, and somebody somewhere might be putting me in their Maitrivasin, and I can feel good about that. So gradually, my confidence started to grow, and after just running through lists and lists of positive qualities, eventually, I managed to just summon more positive energy around myself, And I don't remember when I first noticed that I wasn't getting depressive episodes anymore. I don't know when that stopped, and maybe it's just a coincidence. Probably isn't. When did I stop doing it? I don't know. But it does, that has stopped, and it gives me confidence in the practice. And then it's not just in my relationship with myself that I've felt the positive effects. I often call to mind my good friend Steve, who was a friend from London, and so we don't see each other as often as we used to, and he'll often sort of come up and stay. And I'd look forward to his visits, but then I'd find it really irritating because he'd have all these annoying little foibles and quirks and habits, like the way he couldn't blow his nose without finishing it with a really loud trumpet that would make passers-by turn around and look at us. Or he'd just give ear-splitting coughs in the confined space of the car, or just hiking his trousers right up under his armpits. And I used to sort of, when eventually started wondering how I could bring him most effectively to mind, and these were the quirks that came up. And when they started coming up, instead of making me annoyed, they made me smile. And I realised that actually these quirks, these foibles, these things are just the things that make Steve, Steve. And he's my mate and I love him. And those quirks are just part of the fabric. And what I had interpreted were bad habits were just him. And it was only my interpretation of them. What I saw, what I heard didn't change, but the way I felt about it did. And so when he does it now, it just makes me smile, and I kind of stuff that feeling in the bank of good feelings for Steve. And when I stopped voicing the criticism, I stopped feeling the irritation as well. And that's completely transformed the relationship. I don't criticize him. I don't say, can you not do that? And he feels more comfortable. And we're more at ease when we spend time together, just by being able to let him be. And I do it with other friends as well. I don't know when I sit down who might come to mind, but concentrating on applying thought to what it is that I like about people. I can hang on to that when I see them. And I'm more pleased to see them. I might even tell them so, which is, kind of unusual for me. But it breeds stronger, deeper friendships. The quality of the friendships that I have with friends in the Sangha is very different than people that I used to know. And then you can begin to imagine the same qualities in people that you don't know. And when you're sort of calling strangers to mind, the people that I'd see every day, there was Dog Man and Security Guy, and more recently Hat Boy. And once you've given them so much attention, they don't feel like strangers anymore. And it's just kind of nice to walk through the world seeing people that you kind of feel like that you feel warmth towards them and maybe from them just as a fellow human being. I may remain a stranger as far as they're concerned, but I'm always pleased to see them, strangely. And I'm less judgmental about strangers. I sort of glance in somebody's trolley at Sainsbury's and think, well, it's no wonder, is it? Instead of sort of people just being things, obstacles on the street or as I go about my business, they're human beings, and I can see that now. And everybody's sort of working with their own conditions. Instead of why that woman doesn't just sort herself out, I can kind of see that, her life must be really hard. Look at all the stuff she's got going on. My interpretation of what I'm seeing has changed. So the contact hasn't changed. I'm still seeing the same thing, but my experience of it is different. The feeling is different. And again, I think I do recall one instance I was driving along and I saw somebody walking along the road, and my instant reaction was to snap to a judgment, and then I didn't. And it was a revelation. And I was like, oh, I've stopped doing that. I remember there was an urban retreat here probably about 4 years ago now, and I went home from that one day and I saw two older guys greeting each other on the street, and I saw the warmth in that exchange, and it almost broke my heart. And it's just being able to see it everywhere is just fantastic. Because where it gets harder to see is in the fourth stage, and I ignored all the advice, as we all do, and just went straight in with my mortal enemy, which was a work colleague who really was making my life very difficult, to the extent that I'd already reported him at work for bullying me constantly in the workplace. And when I sat down, it would often feel like I'd often have a real physical reaction, and it just felt like a knot, and it was very uncomfortable, and I just want to get up and go and do something else. Until one day I just saw behind it. He was a salesperson, so his income entirely depended on how much revenue he brought in, and that was kind of dependent on my cooperation. So if he'd promised something to a customer, I needed to make sure the customer got it, or there would just be consequences. I couldn't just go and say, it's impossible, or they can have it but not for another 6 months, or they can have it but it's going to cost another £30,000. That just wasn't possible. And it was fear, because he had a young family to support. He had, the massive mortgage, the flashy car, a couple of kids, the wife, the au pair, the fancy holidays. And that depended on my cooperation and my activity to maintain the lifestyle that they valued so much. And I saw that his aggression just came from a place of fear, really, simple as that. Now, it did not miraculously transform our working relationship, but it did enable me to stop taking it so personally. Once I'd seen where it was coming from, and I just thought, well, that's what he's working with. I learned not to absorb the negativity that he was sending my way. And all these transformations seem to have just happened. And all this despite me not being very good at meditation. So the one line that I heard that I really liked was like that the object of meditation is not to have good meditations, but that your meditation should change you. And I found that a far more useful teaching. And there's nothing wrong with my practice other than the way I feel about it. In my opinion, which it would appear actually is entirely irrelevant. It's not transformed me into this loving, kind angel that just skips through the world, strewing flowers and happiness everywhere I go. Negative thoughts, critical thoughts still arise, but I clock them a lot sooner. And I see them, and as soon as you notice them, it takes their power away. And, and I remember that there's a fellow human being here. Don't talk to yourself that way. Don't talk to other people that way. It's fine. I think Vidania's talk last week talked briefly about the 6 realms, and I think almost it enables me to feel more human, that I'm not surrounded by animals and titans and just hostility or problems everywhere I look. I'm in a sea of human beings. So for me, the most amazing revelation is that I don't have to think I'm good at it. I don't have to believe I'm good at it. The magic is that it will work anyway. Regardless of what I think, it will still do its magic.
Wow, I feel like I can't really follow those talks, but I'm going to have to try. So I said at the beginning that last week when Vidania was talking, he was talking about how a crucial aspect of meditation is about, in a way, going into a different realm and accessing something else, something higher, and then bringing something of that back into our normal life and sort of perfuming our normal life. And he said that one of the ways we can do that is to meet the beings who dwell in these realms. So I want to this evening talk to you about a practice I do which is designed to do this actually. It's designed to help me to meet a being who lives in a different realm, one particular being, and bring his influence to perfume the rest of my life. And here he is. The suspense. Here he is. So he's a blue Buddha. He's called Akshobhya. And his name means unshakable, the unshakable Buddha. And most mornings I meditate on Akshobhya. I visualise him, I bring him to mind, I chant his mantra. And there's a way that I do this. So when people are ordained into our order, most people are given a sadhana practice on one or other different Buddha or Bodhisattva figures. And different people choose different figures depending on who they're drawn to. And I've always been very drawn to Akshobhya. And they say that the beauty of these figures draws us towards enlightenment. And I don't have very long. I can't spend ages going into lots of detail about all the symbolism and everything, so I'm not even going to try actually. I'm just going to talk about my experience and hope that something of the symbolism sort of emerges through that. I'm just going to draw out a few ways in which my practice of visualising Akshobhya, being in relationship with Akshobhya, how this does permeate my normal life. And I'm going to end by saying something about why this might be relevant to most of you who don't do sadhana practice. And it's quite hard to talk about meditation at the best of times, and particularly to talk about this sort of meditation. So the way I'm going to talk might sound a little bit like I'm describing a dream or a picture. So maybe try and listen with those sorts of ears to what I say, and don't take it too literally. Make it more like an evocation of something or other. So there's a particular wisdom associated with Akshobhya, which I really love. It's a beautiful image. It's called the mirror-like wisdom. Wisdom like a mirror. So if you think of a really good mirror, not those weird ones you get at fun fairs, really like good, flat mirrors, when you look at them, they don't distort the image at all. You just see exactly, you get back exactly what you're putting there. The image isn't distorted. Nothing is added on or changed or layered on top. It's very clear. So Akshobhya's wisdom is the kind of wisdom that helps us to look directly at things without adding lots of stories on top, the sorts of stories that cause us lots of discomfort and craving and aversion and feed our delusion. So without all those stories. And for me, everything about the image of Akshobhya represents that. But in particular, the mudra, so the hand gesture that he makes, so he's touching the earth in the same way that this Buddha here is touching the earth. And there's a whole story around that to do with confidence. But in this context, and particularly at the moment in my practice, because it changes over time, at the moment, that earth-touching gesture is a constant connection with what is. So being constantly in touch with what is actually going on at this very moment, without distortion, without stories, without stuff added on. This is just how it is. To not be afraid. He's not afraid to be with this experience. He's not running away from what he doesn't want, and he's not grasping after and running towards what he desires. He's just steady, stable, he's grounded like a big blue mountain of love. And this aspect of Akshobhya, there's so much I could say about Akshobhya, but this one aspect is the one that I really want to dwell on, because it's this aspect of Akshobhya that makes me fall in love with him. This is what I want. This is what I want. I long to see with those eyes. So those eyes that have the courage to accept every situation as it is, without turning away, and without adding on all the extra stories of suffering that I normally would add on. And I long to see with those eyes because they're happy, joyful eyes. And sadly, most of the pictures of Akshobhya that I see don't look that happy. But he really is happy, I promise you. He's delighted. He's really, really delighted. He's delighted to see me. And his devotees are said to dwell in the pure land of Abhirati. And Abhirati means great joy. So we dwell in the land of great joy when we see with those eyes. And why? Because, what a joy. what a joy to just be able to turn towards experience without getting into a flap about it and without adding lots of stuff on, without, what a relief to stop fighting reality. Because let's face it, reality will always win. We're never going to win a battle against reality, against what's going on. That's always going to beat us. And I have a very live example of this. So this morning I woke up and thinking, I've got a whole day to write my talk for this evening, how lovely, with a raging infection in my mouth, and I had to get an emergency dental appointment to get some drugs. And so I realised that actually my lovely spacious day was now going to be cut in quite vastly with a kind of trip across town to the dentist and to the chemist. And of course what immediately comes in then for me, what came in was this kind of, no, that's not the day I'm supposed to be having today. Today is Tuesday, that's the day I'm writing my talk, and it's not the day I'm going to go and have a dentist appointment. That needs to happen on a different day, and I'm not writing a talk. But actually, of course, the reality of the situation was that I needed to go to the dentist. And but I didn't want that, because that wasn't my plan, and that was not the day I wanted to have. So there was a lot of aversion, and those sorts of thoughts are actually the process of me creating dukkha for myself. No, don't want it, can't happen, don't, just ignore. So lots of dukkha. So actually what I did is, rather pleasingly, I got up and went to meditate on Akshobhya. So that was a good move, because actually what happened when I was doing that is, so all the Buddha and the Bodhisattva figures, they kind of send this light out. So as you can see, Akshobhya is a deep, deep blue, and his light is quite a light blue actually. It's kind of a turquoise light, and it kind of comes down, and as his light was coming down through me, I just found that wisdom that he holds, just dispelling that sort of aversion, dispelling those sorts of thoughts, and just allowing me to turn towards the situation as it was, and just allowing me to get off my cushion at the end, go upstairs, make an appointment, go to the dentist, write my talk. No kind of drama. And in a way, just to give in, actually. I think there's a lot of the time I resist, and often the need is to give in to what is going on. And I often experience Akshobhya's influence like a compass, like reorientation. So it's almost like when I'm trapped in that aversion, I've kind of wandered, my compass point's wandered off somewhere, and when I'm in touch with Akshobhya, it just kind of back to north again, and I know where I'm going. And also, not to give in a sort of begrudging, irritated sort of, well, fine, if I must, sort of a way, because that's not the best. But in a way, armed with wisdom that, life is just like that, actually. Life does, these sorts of things do happen, and things arise dependent on conditions. And I, sadly, am just one condition, and there are lots of other ones, and I can't control those. And really, we don't have much control over much, actually. It's frightening to think about how little we have control over in this world. And and it's that wisdom, a wisdom that reminds me that that things aren't separate. So that's the kind of the essence of the wisdom, that because things arise dependent on conditions, we are just so connected. We're so connected in this kind of intimately tender, connected flow. That's actually what's going on. That's actually what's going on. And it's my choice about whether I resist that flow or not. It's entirely up to me how much dukkha I decide to heap into that situation, entirely on my back. All that's going on is this flow, and I choose, do I resist that? Do I create dukkha or not? Entirely up to me. So Akshobhya's teaching to me very much in this sort of situation, and generally as well, is this is how it is. Like, he has a traditional mantra as well, but really his mantra to me has always been, this is how it is, this is how it is, this is how it is. And I tell you, when I can be in touch with that, I find such peace and joy in just giving up the fight with reality. And actually by doing that, winning the war, I suppose, against craving and aversion, by giving up that fight in the moment. And over the couple of years that I've been meditating on Akshobhya, I've found myself more and more able to do that, actually, to just turn and face things that I didn't want to face about myself, about the world, about other people. that I'd rather ignore, things which frighten me. And I see that, I'm sure it's a fruit of many things that I do, but I mainly attribute that to the fruit of meditating on Akshobhya, the fruit of his influence on me, and in a way, the blessings that he gives me when I do that. And I just want to say something about why overall the practice is so important to me. I think last week Vidanya was talking about how meditation gives us this different way of seeing things, something beyond us, and the transcendental, something beyond the mundane. And he talks about how in Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials there's the subtle knife that's the instrument that's used to cut through into other realities. And I think my sadhana practice of Akshobhya is like my subtle knife. It helps me to create that doorway into another way of seeing things, another realm, which perfumes everything about the rest of my life. If I don't do my sadhana, I notice it immediately. I'm just different. And for years and years, I used to do the school visits. And when we were talking about the Buddha, we'd explain about the Buddha. We'd say, well, he's not a god, but he's who we want to be like when we grow up. That's why we have him. He shows us who we can become. And I suppose I want to become like Akshobhya when I grow up. He's who I want to be when I grow up. And when I'm not in touch with this vision by doing my sadhana, I begin to feel lost. I've lost my vision. I've lost what I'm moving towards. It's like I'm on a path and which is being lit by the sun, and the sun has gone down and I'm going the wrong way. Or it's like I begin to feel a bit dry, or like things are on automatic pilot. Or as if a spring inside me is drying up, or as if a fire is burning down. So I know that's a lot of different images, but that's how it feels. It feels like something's dying in me. And I need that fire and I need that spring to live this Dharma life. Like I can't do it without it. So in a way what Akshobhya really gives me is meaning. He gives me a vision. He gives me a reason to get up in the morning and to do what I do. And without that, I don't think I could, actually. He embodies the qualities I want to embody myself, and mysteriously, by dwelling on them each day, I become that person more and more. I've still got a long way to go, but I've become more of that person. So why am I telling you all this? How is this in the least bit relevant to anybody? Hopefully, well, maybe it'll inspire some of you to ask to join the order. That'd be lovely. But even if it doesn't, I think hopefully it speaks to you about the potential, the profound potential of opening up to the influence of a Buddha or Bodhisattva figure. It's not just kind of a nice little picture. Like it can actually really transform our lives. They're profound images, these figures, profound symbols of reality and the awakened mind. If you don't like Akshobhya, here are some other ones. And there are loads more as well. We've got Green Tara, Padmasambhava, Shakyamuni Buddha and Vajrapani. So they come in all shapes and sizes. And they all communicate the quality of an awakened mind. So I'd really just like to encourage you, if you have even a glimmer of the faintest interest in any of these figures, it's really worth opening up to and pursuing that and getting curious about that, because something which is bigger and higher is speaking to you and it's calling to you, and you need to listen. And you don't need to understand the language either. You just need to listen. And if that's not your bag, like if you're not into figures or you're a bit too new for that and it doesn't make much sense to you, well, this is still relevant, I think, because you're here for some reason. You've responded to something, even if it's not an image. So something that you've heard here, something you've contacted here, it draws you back. It draws you back. So what love is it that draws you here? I suppose that would be my question. Because that's what it's all really about in the end. If we don't love it, we're not going to do it. We'll do something else. So if we need to know what it is that we love, and know what it is that draws us back again and again, and reflect on it, meditate on it, let it be that subtle knife that helps us to access those states that perfume and permeate the rest of our lives. Help us to live in this realm of beauty more and more. So I just want to end with a poem which I completely love, and by Sangharakshita, which feels really important in connection with Akshobhya and his teaching to me that we need to stop fighting reality. And this truth that seeps into me daily, but also is like a lightning bolt each time it dawns on me more and more. So it's called Life is King. Hour after hour, day after day, we try to grasp the ungraspable, pinpoint the unpredictable. Flowers wither when touched. Ice suddenly cracks beneath our feet. Vainly we try to track bird flight through the sky, trace dumb fish through deep water, try to anticipate the earned smile, the soft reward, even try to grasp our own lives. But life slips through our fingers like snow. Life cannot belong to us. We belong to life. Life is king.